What do we do without spring football? Well, Pete visits everywhere. That's one thing. And what are we going to do about Purdue? This is the College GameDay Podcast for April 11th. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel, and Bill Connelly joining us. And of course, I mentioned Purdue early in the podcast because Barry Odom is the head coach now. And we all know, if you are a loyal listener of this pod, how dedicated Bill is in his fandom of Barry Odom. But I need to start this podcast by saying this. Now that college basketball is over, we turn our attention back to college football. Nothing upsets any human more than it upsets Jay Billis when college football finally comes to an end in mid to late January, and he goes on some show. And as they introduce him, they say, now that college football is over, we turn our attention to college basketball. It absolutely drives him insane. So I thought maybe I would reciprocate at least here in April. Now, typically, gentlemen, we would be all wound up and absurdly so in anticipation of watching spring games. Spring games have disappeared. Bill, you wrote a column outlining some of the things to be excited about. Pete, you've gotten your fix by going around and visiting various programs. So why don't we start with your visit to Texas, which I assume coincided with your trip to the Final Four? Since we're not going to see the big spectacular spectacle of a spring game on the 40 acres, what did you find out?
Well, it was good to stop in and see Steve Sarkisian. I did not see a practice. Not that you can really glean a ton from one spring practice anyway, but at least you can see guys on the hoof and kind of run around a little bit. I think takeaway one would be like, this is Arch's team now, and Sark is excited about that. He said that because Arch has been there so long, he's really developed a good rapport with him. Arch has command of the offense. He's been patient. He said that there's a little bit of a swagger to Arch. That's my word, not his. If there's a good play in practice, Arch will look over at Sark and wink at him, like, see what I did there? So there's just some kind of fun nuggets. I think we, as a collective college football fandom, mediadom, whatever it is, have been waiting for Arch, right? And some people have been clamoring for Arch, and some people are waiting for Arch. So it was kind of fun to not talk about him in like hushed tones of a manufactured quarterback controversy, but rather in a, here is Arch, and he is and he's ready to and he's ready to go. Sark said that Arch definitely has grandpa's genes, not his uncle's genes, which I thought was an amusing observation. Which means he looks like a 5-star. He throws like a 5-star, but he also moves better than you thought. And I think anyone that watched the 2 games he started in his relief appearances last year would have come away impressed with his legs. And he also said there's still a lot to learn. The one question I asked him was, and I'd be curious what you guys think about this. I said, I hope there's some grace for a learning curve. I did not reference you, Rece, but I said some people think he's going to be first team All-SEC quarterback. I don't mind. You can. I'll own that. I do. And that's fine. Totally.
Nussmeier may have something to say about that for sure. But
there's a few others. Old Nico, if he gets his contract situation fixed, probably.
Oh my goodness.
Probably could have a say in it. Yeah, there's a bunch of good proven guys, but he's certainly talented. But just drive 3 at Columbus week 1, he throws a bad pick. Like, does the internet, or his highs so high and his lows so low? Like, do we judge him by the body of work, I guess, is the thing that I'll be curious about as he formally enters the crucible here.
You know what I think about this? I don't ask Bill how Texas stacks up in his rankings right now. Here's what I think that's going to happen with Arch, and it's unfortunate. Because of the attention he's going to get, he is going to become a fan favorite by those outside of Texas, and others outside of Texas. He is going to be the ultimate villain. And I don't just mean Oklahoma people, because it's like the analogy that I use if you start hyping up a restaurant or a movie or a TV show, that when you keep saying how great it is and how exciting it is, and you cannot miss this, it is the cynical human nature of many to start rooting against it. That's going to happen with Arch. those who are not predisposed to like him, whether they are a Texas fan or they like the Mannings or they like Manning cast or whatever, or they just feel like it's too much too soon, they're going to root against him. So I do think that what you said, Pete, is insightful. Everything's going to be amplified. The dart that he throws in, between two defenders for a touchdown is going to be hailed as the greatest pass in the history of college football. And the interception on the misread is going to be, see, he's not good. And the good thing about that family as a whole, and I don't know Arch. I know Peyton some, Eli some, know Archie pretty well, his grandfather, know Cooper. I don't know Arch really, but the family genes would indicate he's going to be able to handle it just fine. Kind of a smirk and a wink, and he told a reporter the other day, "What's the fancy clothing company? I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right. Is it Viore? Is that the way you pronounce it? The athletic wear."
The Livy Dunn sponsored Viore.
I don't know, whatever. Yes. Is that the one? Yeah. Does Arch have a contract with them or something?
Athleisure. I don't know if Arch has that.
I thought anyway, it doesn't matter for the story. He's got some deal with something, and he sort of joked with a reporter, "We got to get you some drip." And like one of the old crusty Texas reporters.
I hope it was Kirk Bowles.
I think it was. I think it might have been, but I don't want to swear to that in a court of law, because the point of the story is that he has a personality. He kind of understands how this is. He's seen how his family commands attention and how they've responded to it. He's still young. I mean, I'm sure he's going to have his moments, both on the field and off, that will be frustrating. But I think on the outside, there's going to be all of this hubbub about him. See, he's no good. See, he's the greatest Manning of them all. All of those things. And I figure that Arch is just going to keep playing, keep cracking jokes, keep throwing touchdowns, and I think he's going to be outstanding, and I think he'll handle it emotionally just fine. Bill, what does it say about Texas? Now, he does have to replace some offensive linemen, and going through some of the tape and some of the stuff in preparation for the draft, a couple of guys they lost, while they're going to be picked, they had some holes. Up there last year. It's not like that they were the most dominant offensive line in the history of the world, up front last year. So what does it look like for Texas? Also losing some receivers as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, everything you just said was why, as a fan, I really enjoyed rooting against Peyton Manning in the 90s and early 2000s, because
exactly
he was the second coming in every possible way. And I was like, this guy's not. And so every time he threw a bad pass, I'm like, what am I supposed to see in this guy? He broke me down. He broke me down a little bit
Bill
through
Connelly,
the years.
Big Charles Woodson guy.
That's right. Well, that was actually, now that you say that, I was rooting for Charles Woodson because he wasn't the guy that was supposed to win it.
Do I need to give my controversial Heisman take again on that? Peyton Manning should have won the Heisman Trophy, but not in 97. In 97, the right guy won it.
Okay.
I think his sophomore season, Eddie George, great player, no doubt about it. I thought Peyton was the Heisman Trophy winner that year. Anyway, I digress. Bill, continue, please.
No, I mean, I think he, that there will be just kind of a national narrative pro against and all that stuff. And, as Peyton handled it just fine, you're assuming Arch will too. It's funny because, he started off, the first sustained look we got at of him last year was pretty much the greatest debut in the history of college football for the most part. Quinn Ewers gets hurt against UTSA. He comes in, throws a 19-yard touchdown pass. Next possession, 67-yard touchdown run. Starts the second half, 51-yard touchdown pass, 75-yard touchdown pass. It was just unreal. And then, over time, opponents started to figure out what was going on, how to read him a little bit, how to confuse him a little bit. And his numbers kind of sank back to normal levels. But no, he's... as far as pedigrees go, this is pretty much the most perfect thing you'll ever see. And he's had 2 years to sit back and actually start understanding college football before he has to really prove himself over a full season. So from an SP Plus perspective, they're seventh. They're starting off seventh this year, not first or second. There's no extra Arch effect kind of thing in the numbers. From a numbers
Bill's
perspective,
numbers have no bias.
That's right. Even if I did.
No nepotism in SP Plus, Rece.
I read Bill's article, Pete. Bill has a big red button that he pushes to tabulate the SP plus. And what is little known is that if you raise the door underneath the big red button, there's an arch button.
I mean, I think that arch button is going to be him throwing for 350 yards against Ohio State in the first week, and then poof, everything's going to be. No one
will overreact to that if he goes to the horseshoe and wins. No one will overreact to that.
No, not at all.
Overreact if he goes in the horseshoe and throws an interception late, they lose. No one will overreact to either of those things. You know?
There are so many built-in overreactions for the beginning of this season, by the way. You got this, you've got LSU, Clemson sitting out there. You've got Alabama playing pretty consequential games in September with a new quarterback. We're going to have plenty of narratives to lean on. Not that that's ever been a problem in college football, but no, what's interesting is, Texas is projected 7th. That's first in defense and 28th in offense because, again, there's no arch effect. So all it sees is a team that just lost its starting quarterback, its top 2 receiving targets, and like 4 out of 6. And like you said, 4 offensive linemen, including a consensus All-American in Calvin Banks Jr. There is a lot to replace here. And then you go to the defensive side of the ball. It's obviously getting the benefit of the doubt because of the linebackers in the secondary, but top 4 defensive linemen are gone too. So it is not a given that Texas is, supposed to start at the top of the SEC heap this year. And I think that's what we're going to see from the polls. But there are questions to answer, especially in the trenches. It took Steve Sarkisian so long to kind of get line play where it needed to be at Texas. And now it's a pretty big red reset button in that regard. And maybe Arch Papers overall cracks. We'll see. But there are still plenty of questions for Texas to answer here.
Our theme for this podcast to me is, in lieu of the spring games, we're kind of looking ahead to what we might do and some type of reaction, things we're looking forward to, what we're trying to garner, talk a little bit about Pete's trips as well. But, you brought up a game, Bill, that I was thinking about. And Pete, I'm not going to let you hold me to this because I want to reserve the right to change my mind later. But I'm thinking of putting Clemson preseason number 1. And speaking of people, rooting against and see, you're a moron. That first week, that first game against LSU could turn things around. And, LSU has, they've bolstered their roster to say the least through the transfer portal. They've got Garrett Nussmeier back. And then they go into Clemson with all of the changes that Dabo Swinney has made, and maybe the emergence of Cade Klubnik to reach his long-awaited ceiling. I think there's some opportunities. I'm not for sure going to do that, but even if I did, I would probably still have LSU 2 or 3. I'm really considering
this should be
right
your
now,
Michigan pick from 2 years ago, Rece.
Well,
you went in a lane. Nobody else was in the lane, and you stayed in the lane, and you were proven correct.
I felt stronger about that than I do this. I was convicted that Michigan team was the best team. I don't know. I was just convinced of it. I'm not as convinced on Clemson yet and haven't made a final decision, because the scariest thing I could do right now, I was thinking about this the other day, and how do I stack up the teams? Going Clemson, Penn State 1-2 is a roll of the dice. That's a roll of the dice there. People got on me for being chalk in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
that's anti-chalk now. Maybe a few years ago, Clemson number 1 wasn't chalk. It is now.
I would think at this point, Penn State is the most returning talent. All right. Now, that doesn't say, like, there could certainly be skepticism to whether or not they are number 1. But on paper, I would have to think, with the top quarterback projected in the next draft, the best tailback tandem in the country, probably by far, certainly as returning tailbacks go. And then I've been told reliably from that building that their offensive line is going to be the best one that they've had. They feel really, really good. And that was a glaring weakness. Now, again, the 3 of us may be lining up at receiver. They need somebody late in the portal. They've been very vocal about that. I'm not being critical to who they have. Like, they've been very open, saying they need to fill something in there. But I have not put a lot of thought to where all that would go, and I'm kind of getting out of the fog of basketball here a little bit too, like you, Rece. So I haven't really dialed in on what's next, in part because it's going to change here with the portal. But I will accentuate your Clemson point with this. When the story broke that Cade Klubnik was coming back, I believe he announced it. I put out a tweet and I said, this should solidify Clemson as a top 5 team next season. And the first response on Twitter was top 5 in the ACC question mark. That Twitter machine. Sometimes you got to tip your hat and say that.
It didn't take long. No. And it shows how this sport, it did not take long for Clemson to go from the very top of the sport to people just eager to shoot their shot and put slings and arrows at them. I mean, look, it hasn't been that long since they won the national championship and played for one. So,
I mean, I will say, like, as far as Clemson, Penn State 1-2, not that you're gonna end up doing that, but Clemson is absolutely the bigger leap of those two. Like, looking at my rankings again recently, like last 3 years, Penn State's been 6-5-5. Finished the year in SP Plus, basically just losing to teams above them for the most part. Clemson's been 16th, 23rd, and even last year 22nd. I think they gave us, we used to have all these bowl bumps where a team would play well in a random bowl and then end up like 8th in the preseason poll the next year. I think we've gotten a little better at that for the most part. With Clemson, we are reacting to one game where they were suddenly explosive again. Cade Klubnik averaged like under 11 yards per completion for most of 2 years under Garrett Riley. Then he's slinging the ball downfield to TJ Moore for big gains against a really good Texas secondary last year. You're like, okay, this is exactly what we wanted to see from them for a long time. We've still only seen it once though. And we need to find out that that's the real thing. And that's why I love this LSU game in week 1. That's going to tell us so much about about two of the teams I have the absolute most questions about. So I just like getting things knocked off the docket right off the bat, and that's what that game will be.
I really hope that somewhere in the bowels of the LSU football building and the offensive film room, I hope they can find it within their souls to let Garrett Nussmeier sling it around a little bit. Now that's a dude that does not have problems putting the ball downfield, and it's not an aberration when he does it.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Ole Miss throw, Rece? It was in one of the overtimes. It was like an ode to anticipation. Like the receiver wasn't even in his break, and he just like popped it over the middle for a touchdown. And it was like, where's that ball going? And then like the kid hits his it was just one of those where you're like that's one where a scout's text me and be like, that is what it's supposed to look like.
You know what? Yeah. You know what, Pete? You said earlier, and I'm not disputing that. I think you referenced it, maybe Drew Allar, the number 1 pick in the next draft. I think it might be. I think it might end up being Nussmeier. I think
that's a healthy 1-2 to debate until the season and go through.
It comes out hot. It comes out hot and nice with that cat. It just pops off his hand.
Well, you want to talk about bad last impressions? Drew Allar, you could have thought very favorably of him, and then that final play against Notre Dame, obviously that sealed their fate in the Orange Bowl is the ultimate sour taste. I will say that the NFL, Rece, was very hot on Drew Allar, and even though he had decided to come back, there was still a thirst for him to potentially flip that decision after the playoff had happened. And I don't want to overstate it, like that moment, kept him in school or anything. But that certainly, if they won that game and kept going in the playoff, I think he would have had a pretty tough decision to make. And we could be talking about him as a top 15 pick, like him, Shador in that. Seems like Shador is kind of slotted 9 now to the Saints. Like we could be talking about him and Shador in the QB2 battle at this point.
I like him. I'm not saying that. I just think that Nussmeier might be one of those super gifted guys, but I also think that probably both LSU this year and whatever NFL team gets him, they're going to have some why did he throw that moments because of the supreme confidence he has in his ability to make those throws. And I actually love that kind of guy. I mean, I think he's terrific. He's fun to watch.
That's been one of the things that I've had to learn over time in terms of what translates to the pros is like you can have a guy like Sam Bradford who barely makes a mistake for two years as Oklahoma's quarterback, wins the Heisman, comes out as he's number one, right?
Yeah,
they're really high. Yeah. And then he gets to the pros, he makes every safe pass. He also gets hurt 38 times. I realize that was a role in Sam Bradford's career too, but he never really said, I can make that pass, and tried to make the really tough passes downfield that you end up kind of having to make in the pros. That's been like Drew Allar, aside from the last pass of this, aside from like a couple desperation passes, that interception, thrown against his body over the middle, he's a pretty safe passer. Nussmeier will fire into danger thinking I can do that. And it made for such a strange year last year where he, mid-season, he comes out playing well. Then mid-season, he throws 9 picks in 4 or 5 games or something. But then at the end of the season, he's awesome again. I do think the fact that he emerged from kind of a mid-season funk to play well, and the fact that he's willing to make those passes, I think that's going to make him really, really attractive at the next level.
Okay, no spring game. Where else did you say you'd been recently? Did you go to Ohio State too, Pete?
So I went to Ohio State for Pro Day.
Okay,
which was fun. Sat down with Caleb Downs, sat down with Jeremiah Smith. Got a little feel for them, and then it was just around. Ohio State Pro Day is a spectacle, by the way. I mean, it's just, and I'm sure Alabama Pro Day
sort of redundant, isn't it? To say Ohio State and pros, it's redundant.
Yes,
Ohio State and pros, right?
Someone was like, "Who was there for NFL?" And it was like, "Who? What?" There was 145 NFL various personnel there. There was Mike Vrabel. There was every line coach. Kellen Moore was slated to be there. In fact, there were so many NFL head coaches, I didn't see them all because you got to track 145 people while you're wandering around. Every major agent was there, obviously, because they're either on, the dozen guys they have going, or they're on the next crop with NIL. It was a sight to behold. From talking to some of the coaching staff members and being around for the day, I think the takeaway is this: they're obviously optimistic about next season and they have high-end stars, but there are a lot of variables there and a lot of roles to fill in, and that's what happens when you lose. What do you think they'll have? 12 guys drafted? 14?
1,
Probably.
2, 3, 4, 6. That'll be.
It'll be in the Michigan record neighborhood. It'll be a top 5 draft class in history, and it's just, again, it is hard to just regenerate that. And it will be interesting to see in this spring portal, which is coming up, I believe, next week, where who is available and who really pounces, because there's a couple interesting factors at play here, right? You have teams with cash to burn because they feel like they can spend money before the cap gets set in July 1, right? So you have teams with blocks of cash, which means if you are like a mediocre fringe starter that's a position of need somewhere, you could get like the biggest payday you're ever going to get in your life if you ditch metaphorical Marshall to go to a Big Ten school or an SEC school that really needs a tight end or really needs a rush edge or anything. So we're going to see some big money deals for good players, but they're going to be paid great money because of the weird confluence of need and situation and historic legal settlement that should pass, but we don't quite know if it will yet. So it's a fascinating moment in time right now. Buckeyes, look, the QB race will be the story. Feels like we've had 5 high-profile Buckeye QB races, since Urban got there. Just with remember they had the 3 that one year with JT, Cardale, and Braxton. So it'll be really interesting to see how this one unfolds. But I think Ohio State will be fine, but I don't think they'll be an undefeated juggernaut. It's interesting, but Bill, you haven't won, right?
I haven't won. I'm fine with them being number 1, just because of what's proven and what they've recruited and everything. But also, as I wrote in a piece about interesting teams last week. Penn State, even if Ohio State's number one, Penn State has a massive opportunity for all the reasons you just said. The volatility, the potential variance of Ohio State's outcomes this year, right down to the fact that I didn't really love either coordinator hire he just made, makes them a really, really just it's a big range here. And Penn State and other Big Ten teams will at least enter this season thinking they have a chance to top them, even if it turns out that upside is upside and Ohio State still has the most of it.
It's I think that's something that maybe people haven't yet, because we haven't really locked in yet. Maybe they will in the fall. The staff turnover at Ohio State, and Chip Kelly being gone. Now you're I know you have new quarterbacks, at least one new quarterback that seems to have an early lean publicly in Julian Sayin, but maybe he won't win the job. But you're 3 coordinators in 3 years now. On offense, and they're changing defensive coordinators too, with Knowles going to Penn State. So it's kind of an interesting time for Ohio State to follow up on the brilliance that they found late in the season.
Well, at least Ryan Day will have, the benefit of the doubt from the fan base, I'm sure. He has a lot of, never mind. I can't really say that without a straight face.
I think he can tell. I think he can tell them to kick rocks now, the ones who are doing it, because I think most of the rational fans, let's be clear about this. It's it might be a larger minority than some places, but it's a vocal minority who were irrational over Ryan Day prior to the playoff run, right? So I think even some of those have to have been won over, because one of the things that I hypothesized that's a little bit of collateral damage in this playoff era that we have. Michigan and Ohio State's always going to be wildly important. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But when you lose that game, and it seems as if the sky has fallen, and maybe the coach is going to get fired, and there's going to be a mass exodus, to the NFL and to other ports of call in college football, because everybody's getting out of there because of the disaster that just unfolded from Big Blue. And then you turn around and do what they did in the playoff and in the championship game. Now you go, okay, it stinks, and it's important, and we're always going to be mad. But it's also not the end of the world, because there's no asterisk on the championship that Ohio State just won, because they lost by a point to Oregon in the regular season, and then had a failure against Michigan. That's part of the world that we live in now, which has made college football and the championship analysis decided a little bit more like all of the other sports, So I think that will also extend some grace to him.
I do think it was funny the way that played out. And I love that 38 million other games matter more. And I'm willing to trade that for Ohio State, Michigan meaning a little bit less, especially if it means a little less toxicity in the sport as a whole. I think that might end up being a good thing too in that regard.
I don't know, Bill. I think we might need, Pete roots for a little dose of toxicity, right, Pete? Just to keep things interesting a little bit.
I don't know if I want toxicity.
Okay, all right. So you guys are going to split. You guys are going to split hairs over semantics between chaos and toxicity, right? Okay.
I had two Michigan fans MF me standing by the Alamo in San Antonio. All right, like there's toxicity left.
All right, we can probably
random
do without
Saturday
that.
afternoon.
Man, I want so badly to tell a story right now, but I probably shouldn't. Something that happened off air on the set. I shouldn't do that on podcast. That's not very nice. Let's just say that a heckler got more than what was coming to him. At San Antonio. So that was pretty good. I advised said heckler, who then tried to recoup his losses. I said, "Hey, bro, take the L and move along."
To finish the point, though, was that it felt like that game ended up meaning more for Michigan than Ohio State. Kind of flipped it around, because they still love that they won that game.
They should. They should love that.
They sure loved bringing it up after Ohio State won the title. And then also they got to finish the year beating Ohio State and Alabama and heading in with this completely different outlook, getting Underwood and all that. So still meant a lot. If it meant slightly less than all this other stuff meant more, I'm cool with it. But it definitely means different things, it seems like.
to avoid, I was teasing you guys about toxicity. That's probably the difference, right? It still means a lot, and it still brought some chaos to the picture, and it still brought emotion to the picture, and it gave Michigan a bolt of confidence that they will probably carry over into this season, and certainly will carry in when the Buckeyes show up at the Big House, at the end of the regular season. But it didn't rise to the level of, well, we've got to fire everybody and break this thing down to the studs because we lost one game. So that's probably the appropriate balance between chaos and toxicity.
And I would say this on Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan lost 5 games last year. The last time they lost more than 5 games, Brady Hoke went 5-7, and they went. So the tenor around Michigan, you mentioned Underwood, Rece, that's a great point. I think that win gave a little hope. That flip happened. No, I think that flip happened the week before, right? Is that?
I don't know. Just consult the multi-billionaire and see when he wrote the check.
Yes, that's a fair assessment.
Or call our friends at LSU. I'm sure they have the time. I'm sure they have it time stamped in their memories when that got flipped on them.
But 8-5, where they finish with some momentum at the end, and obviously that huge bowl win over Alabama would look a lot different if it was 7-6. They're in a different bowl at that point, I think, and it would all feel a lot different going into year 2 under Sharon Moore.
It's a remarkable thing, isn't it? Let's say the opposite end of the
Bill?
week before.
That's what I thought. I think, and that was the first notch of the momentum, and then it kind of spun from there.
Spring game at Ohio State has been a big deal the last few years, particularly once they got challenged by the SEC and wanted to show that they have big crowds too. I'm not sure that there's a lot of anticipation around spring game at Purdue. Purdue was dreadful last year, dreadful. In fact, I felt one of the mistakes I made in ranking teams late in the season was a result of Purdue, because I didn't believe in Illinois, and most of it because I saw Purdue. I saw Purdue almost beat them, and I was like, I just can't get there with these guys because I was wrong, and it was just one of those games that they hadn't control, let get away. We're not going to go down that well too far. That is only to illustrate that Purdue was dreadful last year. And yet, Pete Thamel, because he covers all things, you made your way to West Lafayette.
I think, Rece, this is where we need to remind new listeners of Bill Connelly's affinity for Barry Odom. We've had Barry on the podcast. We've talked about it. When Bill was a student at Missouri, he had a Barry Odom jersey. What number, Bill?
39.
39. Old 39.
Yeah, 39.
Little crooked, two crooked numbers.
So just the way this played out. So let me defend. Well, this isn't a defense at all. I'm from Oklahoma. Came to Missouri as from Weatherford, Oklahoma. Barry Odom's Ada had beaten Weatherford in the playoff. Missouri had another guy on the team from Carl Albert High School in Oklahoma City, or in Midwest City, that was also that had also torched Weatherford, basically. So I immediately had my two favorites, the two guys who beat my team, and Odom was one of them, and he was the prototype hard-nosed linebacker who was injured 38 times every game and made every tackle, and it was easy to get behind that.
Yes. Well, it will be easy to get behind Barry Odom because they are starting from the bottom at Purdue.
Yeah.
And it will be that's actually a really interesting test case leaving there of the spring portal and how active it could end up being, because he took over a job. They took a bunch of guys in the portal, but there's clearly just a lot of need. Right. And how much need can you address in a post-spring portal, which is going to be a lot of two roster flotsam and jetsam from other power schools, guys looking for playing time. There is still value in snaps, right? Like if guys want to, or at the end of their career and want to showcase things, if you're the backup nickel somewhere, you are not going to showcase yourself. You're not going to develop in the eyes of scouts. So there is a power to that. There was a four-pronged quarterback race. One thing I've learned in the portal era is every quarterback race is even, Rece. Boy, other than Arch, everywhere. Boy, it's neck and neck. Yeah. We're splitting the one reps. Like, please, God, we can't lose a quarterback. So yeah, it was an interesting vibe at Purdue, and it just had the feeling of we are turning the battleship, and this is the first nudge. Yeah, but look, Barry knows what he's doing. This is his third head coaching job. UNLV was, I don't know if he gets enough credit for how miraculous that turnaround was. I mean, they'd never won there, ever. They hadn't had a player drafted since, and you can use this on the draft trees. I think it's 2013. They're going to have Ricky White drafted this year. I mean, that place has been a black hole, and he turned them into a playoff contender. We actually had serious conversations last year about UNLV making the playoff. So hats off to Barry. Look forward to the magic. But I think, Bill, you could probably keep a Barry Odom jersey on ice this year, maybe next season after some recruiting and development they can push on.
Well, I mean, he basically did exactly this 2 years ago, like you said. I think he doesn't get enough credit, but also just he didn't necessarily get enough attention at the time. How much of that roster he flipped his first year at UNLV? I think this is even more of a flip. I mean, he's going to have like 70 new players this year.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he has a quarterback yet. There are some obvious holes, but no, I mean, this is, it made perfect sense for Purdue to hire him, even though it was a little awkward. He's basically now replacing his former defensive coordinator there. It makes perfect sense that they would have envisioned him for this job because, he turned over a lot. There's like Devin Mockabee from last year. He's still there. Is he going to be the only starter who started last year for Purdue? It's a big job that he's undertaking, and I'm not sure he has all the pieces he needs, but he knows what he's doing.
Devin Mockabee, definitely the face. And then Tony Grimes, remember him from North Carolina, went to UNLV. Yeah. He's probably the most recognizable name on defense. He was a 5-star coming out of high school. Mac Brown got him there. And
didn't he have a layover at Texas A&M too?
No, that's right.
I think he did. He did. That rings a bell.
Yeah, there's a lot of that we've probably now exhausted Purdue content until they actually win a Big Ten game.
Ethan Trent, that was awesome. Barry Odom, hats off. He gave Tyler Trent's brother a scholarship earlier this week. Ethan Trent's a walk-on the Purdue football team, walk-on O-lineman. Awesome moment, bounce around the X machine this week. Obviously, Tyler Trent is a name and a family that really resonates with the Game Day family. So hats off to that. That was a big win.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I double checked, and it is true. Grimes among the many now on their fourth stop on the college football tour. He started early, as I recall. I think he came in early. He was really young at Carolina and started early. And, got the proverbial baptism by fire. And so hopefully he'll be able to live up to his immense talent, and it'll pay off for him about a year from now when the NFL draft is coming on. Guys, as we wrap this up, Bill, I want to borrow from your most interesting teams. You don't have to, we don't have to break it down chapter and verse. Who is, for both of you, who's the most interesting team in the spring as we head into the offseason, as you worry about the portal? Who is most interesting to you? It doesn't have to be who you ranked at the top, but who really, when you go through and think about what's possible for them or what might happen as a result of how they perform, who is it that intrigued you the most off of that group?
Well, this was a weird piece for me to write because, here in another month, I'll be writing the MAC preview, and I'll be just super, super interested in the narratives for, Central Michigan or whatever. I'm interested in everybody, but it's really hard for me to say anything other than Alabama because of, the big red button that produced the SP Plus rankings had Alabama second, which, I like it more when my surprise is when I'm surprised by teams that, aren't always at the top of SP Plus. But it was a pretty big reminder to me that, this team still has more blue chippers than anybody but maybe Georgia and Ohio State. Their defense was 8 in SP Plus last year and returns way more than normal. Most of the 2 deep is back on defense. That should be an absolutely dynamite unit. The offensive line survived with a couple good sophomores last year. very experienced. They get Ryan Williams back. They have basically everything you could possibly want from a national title contender, except the giant question mark that is the quarterback position, like with Ohio State and plenty of other teams. It's been really easy for me to assume that this is going to be Ty Simpson takes over because he's the veteran, and then eventually the young, hot blue chipper quarterback overtakes him or threatens to. But if Ty Simpson was a humongous recruit in his own right. And if, second year with DeBoer, first year with Ryan Grubb, if all these things lead to good quarterback play, they have everything else they need, and all the narratives that they ended last year with just kind of vanish. But they're super interesting to me because it's not going to surprise anybody if they end up being a top 2 or 3 team again, but nobody's talking about them like a top 2 or 3 team right now.
I am very interested in the Ole Miss Rebels, Rece.
Yeah.
I am very interested in Austin Simmons, a lefty who is just dripping with talent. He's the first in my memory. I'm sure somebody's done it. Early enrollee, right? He went 2 classes early. And talented baseball player as well, though he's given that up. And every spring there's a darling, a buzz guy, somebody that's blown everybody away. And Austin Simmons, the Ole Miss quarterback, is projected to start, is that guy. Obviously, Lane Kiffin is one of the best play callers in the sport. He's one of the most deft quarterback tutors in the sport. There is a fascinating tension to Ole Miss of they've been very good but not good enough to make the playoff. Can he be the guy that pushes them through? I am compelled by Oxford right now.
To me, it's Oklahoma. Because of the change in offensive coordinator, bringing in Ben Arbuckle, but more importantly, at least for this season, bringing in John Mateer to play quarterback there. They had quarterback issues last year. They had offensive issues. And it's not just because of that. It's because it is highly likely that Brent Venables' job security depends on it. They need to be better. I'm not saying they have to win the SEC or have to go to the playoff. The Alabama win late for them sort of salvaged a bit of the narrative around them that maybe there's some capabilities there because they were really good on defense. They were just abysmal on offense. So I'm pretty fascinated by Oklahoma. Are they going to be able to take a jump and at least solidify things? Because I think another finish at the bottom of the SEC standings, and I would hate to see that because I've wanted Venables to get a head coaching shot for so long if he wanted it. I was starting to wonder if he wanted it because I think I've told the story on the podcast before. I remember meeting him for the first time early in his career at Oklahoma, first time around when he was there when Bob Stoops first got there, and thinking that guy's going to be a head coach and a good one. And I think he is. But boy, and I'm not saying, Castiglione is a patient guy, the athletic director there, but it's going to get turbulent there if this doesn't work, and if they're not good, if they lose a lot of, games that they should win, if they don't at least find the fringes of contention this year, it's going to be turbulent. So because of that, and I actually think they are poised to take a jump and that this is going to work. But I do think they're fascinating because of the ramifications. There are big stakes involved, in my judgment, there for Oklahoma and having this offensive change and quarterback change work.
And the other interesting part of the whole Oklahoma situation is their schedule's exactly like it was last year. What does they could be a top 15 team and go 8-4, and I would hope that 8-4 is good enough.
I think that would be fine. Fans. Everybody understands the schedule, Bill. I don't think anybody would be upset. 8-4. You just can't get stomped, by some of the teams you need to, and you need to do more than just, and just knocking somebody off and pulling a stunner. If they're good and solid and competitive throughout and do that, it will feel like they've got the ship in the right direction, and here they go, I think. So they'll be fine there.
And the other part of that is, if they're hot at the beginning, if the offense clicks, they beat Michigan and Auburn at home. They're 5-0 when they go to play Texas. They might still end up 7-5 because of the way the schedule is backloaded. But that is a potential out of September kind of story where everybody is freaking out about Oklahoma because they're suddenly their offense is good. And Ben Arbuckle being part of that Western Kentucky turnaround from a few years ago when they were just nothing offensively. Then they bring in the FCS guys and Bailey Zappi throws for 6,000 yards. Like that is the exact turnaround that they are looking for. And, if the offensive line is just competent, then they might get it.
Give us an early point spread, I believe week 2 in Normanville, Michigan at Oklahoma. Who's favored?
Based on the February projections, this might change with when I update them in May, but based on February, it was Michigan by 2.
Michigan by 2. Interesting.
I'll take Oklahoma. I think
I will too, actually.
Running quarterbacks, they're powerful forces. Do you think, Rece, we talked a little bit about Ohio State, Texas in the opener. Do you think old College Game Day could be rolling into Norman week 2? I haven't looked at the schedule enough to really know.
I would have to look at the schedule more closely, but I would think that would certainly be a candidate. I would think so. SEC Big Ten matchups early.
Pretty good brands.
Yeah, good brands there.
Jerome Moore coming home to where he played college ball.
That's right.
Got the opportunity to ride the Sooner Schooner into game day last year. Maybe they'll let me fire a gun or something this year. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd stay away from that.
Why? I'd be out there like one of those roughnecks.
I think there's a lot more downside that could happen firing a gun than upside. But
well, it's not a real one. I mean, it just makes a lot of noise.
Okay, just like a
no. It's like come on, you've seen that. Remember, Corso's had the thing on the set. Hey, let me tell you the one thing when you're on the set when he's done that. I mean, at least decided he doesn't use that prop anymore the last couple of years. But one thing I learned early after getting burned my first or second year by it is when you see the roughneck show up and LC's going to make that pick and he's going to, fire off their giant cannon of a cat pistol or whatever you want to call it, you got to get the earpieces out because if not, I mean, it is so loud through the microphone.
It just echoes in it.
No, it's going to blow your eardrums out. And so you've got to make a quick move and time it right because you still need to hear, the count to the next game and all of that. But you can't risk that, man. When he did that, or if somebody's close to a cannon. If McAfee goes close to a cannon, it's good to get those out away from you a little bit too.
You don't need to hear Gallardo that bad, so you're good.
This is true. Jimmy G, our esteemed producer of College Game Day. This was fun, guys. We'll do it more throughout the offseason. We're going to promise and deliver that we will have some guests as well, some sitting head coaches, particularly over the course of the summer. So, if you're interested, and I know we have several coaches who are loyal listeners, if you're interested in getting your message out there, contact Pete Thamel. You have his number because everybody has his number. Thanks for listening to the College Game Day Podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe or download this wherever you prefer to get your podcasts.